Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you a first look at the Sony FE version of the Sigma 24mm F1.4 art lens. And I have a couple of reasons why I wanted to look at this particular lens. First being is that the 24mm F1.4 is, to my knowledge, the only art series lens that I didn't take a look at in Canon or Nikon versions when they were released, back in the day now. And so as a byproduct of that, I thought I could kill two birds with one stone, and that it would allow me to take a look at this lens optically, but also to kind of broaden the sample size of the art series on Sony that I've done. And if you haven't previously seen, I did a review of the Sigma 50mm f1.4 art on Sony FE, and also compared the FE version with a Canon EF version via the MC11 on Sony, and took a look at that. Now, the waters got a little bit muddied for Sigma in the last few weeks when Sony announced their own 24mm f1.4 G Master lens, which, if it continues with the kind of the standard that has been set by the G Master series so far, I think that we all expect it to be a pretty fantastic lens. And so for a while there, Sigma, had this market, at least at this kind of aperture value, pretty much to themselves. But it was a pretty brief window before Sony has brought their own out. And so I will be using at least the specs for the G Master lens as a benchmark as comparing these. Because one of the, of course, biggest hurdles that Sigma has with any of these art series that they are just kind of adapting or retooling a bit for use on Sony FE is the fact that these lenses were big and heavy on DSLRs, and so of course the byproduct of that is they are bigger and heavier yet when you take them to a smaller mirrorless system. And as we're going to see, one of the unfortunate byproducts of the transfer of an existing lens and retooling it both in the flange distance and in the operation of the autofocus and the aperture, and making that transition to Sony, these lenses have not become smaller. They've actually become both longer and heavier than their equivalent versions on DSLRs. And so we're going to jump in, and I'm going to give you a close hands-on look at the FE version of this lens, along with a few observations compared to both the Canon EF version and then, of course, to that Sony G Master lens. Let's jump in and let's go a little bit closer. So at this point, the basic design of Sigma art lenses are pretty familiar to many of us, particularly for myself. I've used just about all of the art series lenses, and so this feels very familiar in hand. A few things that have changed, however, is, of course, as you can see here near the mount, there's actually a spacer that is here that, adds on a fair bit of length. Now, I find that with these measurements, with these lenses, that Sigma and then some of the retailers are kind of fudging some of the numbers. They're just, reusing the numbers from the Canon or the Nikon or Sigma mounts. But as you can see, there is a spacer that's been added in here. That's where typically like the adapter would be if you were adapting to Sony E, and it's all incorporated in the design. And as we're going to find as we look deeper at this, it is definitely a better performance than using the MC11. But what you're basically ending up with is about the length of the MC11 being added on to the lens. Whereas the Canon or Nikon mount would be here. You can see this extra space that's there to help with the flange distance to the different sensor depth for a mirrorless body. A byproduct of that is that the lens has grown by about 33 millimeters in length, and it's quite a long lens, as you can see now, at 123 millimeters, and that's by my measurement. I'm having to do all my own measurements because I can't find the real numbers on this lens. So that's about 4 3/4 inches, which makes it a fairly significantly sized lens, definitely larger than some of the bigger prime lenses available in Sony, like the 35mm f1.4 or the 50mm f1.4 lenses. And so it's a significant lens. Let's just take a quick look mounting it on a Sony a7R Mark III body, which is about, as big as what you're going to get for the most part. And so as you can see, it's big. It's not unusably big, however, and so I think this is about on the larger size of what I would take. And of course, those of you that have been around and see my reviews, I have added on this small rig kind of grip extender and L bracket here, and so of course that helps for me, and that I've got a place to put my whole hand, and it helps to support bigger lenses like this. But as you can see, it's not a small lens on there, and weight wise, it's definitely significantly heavier than the newly announced 24mm f1.4 GM lens. And so that lens comes in at 445 grams, just a hair under 1 pound. This lens is 768 grams, which means that it has added on the Canon version is 665 grams, and so that means that we have added on pretty close to 110 extra grams in the FE version, which unfortunately means that this is 73% heavier than what the G Master lens is recently announced. And so if small and compact are your priority, you've got a bit of an issue there, because even though the G Master lens is a significantly sized lens, it is much smaller than what the Sigma lens is here. Now, there is some plus, however, when it comes to this transition, and while it's not a full-on weather sealing, what we do find is that they have added a gasket here, and so at least you're getting a little bit of a seal there. As you can see, we've definitely got some extra space in there, which in that spacer. Other than that, though, things are pretty similar here. You have basic, the same basic design. You do have an AF/MF switch, which, by the way, I find handy. I was wanting to test, for example, minimum focus, and so rather than letting the camera, kind of mess around with that, or having to manually select DMF or MF in the Sony body, I could just throw the switch. I always enjoy having a physical switch for that. And it still is nice to have a real distance window as opposed to lenses that are designed with like an STM type motor in mind. One nice feature that you're gaining here compared to maybe with an MC11 version, of course compared to DSLRs, is that when you begin to do input on the focus ring, if you're in manual focus or DMF mode, is that you will automatically get the center portion of the frame zoomed in to help you to visually confirm focus, and that certainly is a nice feature there. That being said, as you can see, the focus throw here is fairly small on this. This is not a lens that's really designed around manual focus. It is designed more around autofocus. Up front, of course, you have the same standard lens hood that you did on the Canon or Nikon or Sigma versions. And around the front, you have a 77mm front filter thread. So that's large, but it's common, and at least you can use filters on that. And so, that's your advantage compared to, say, the 20mm f1.4 art, is that this you can use standard filters on. One strength of this lens is that it can focus down quite close to 9.84 inches or about 25 centimeters. And that gives you a pretty close to class leading reproduction ratio here, a 1 to 5.3, or basically right at 0.19 times. That's an area of advantage compared to the new G Master lens, which is limited to 0.17 times. Inside, you've got the 9 rounded aperture blades, which are standard fare for Sigma art lenses, and the familiar blend of thermal composites is what Sigma calls its engineered plastics, and then some metal bits that are a part of this as well. It all adds up, however, to a fairly large and heavy lens, which again is standard fare for the Sigma art series. One final area of advantage, however, is that you're not paying anything extra for the FE version, despite the fact that they've had to retool it, obviously. And so if you're looking at, the cost of a Canon or Nikon mount plus the Sigma MC11, you're kind of getting the adapted portion for free in there, in a manner of speaking. So $849 for this, and then of course the new the new FE GM version, 24mm f1.4, is going to be $1,400. So a significant savings there. All in all, the lens is nicely built, and if you're familiar with Sigma art lenses, you pretty well know what you're getting with this lens. And so as you can see, while we will take a closer look at the lens optically in a subsequent episode, I'll probably break down the image quality and give you a final verdict at the same time. And so there are some important improvements that come when going to a Sony version as opposed to the MC11, and I'll touch more on those to come. But here is where Sigma's biggest challenge is, and the reason why a lot of people have not really gotten all that excited about these Art Series lenses in FE versions. It's the simple fact that these lenses are particularly large and heavy when you're bringing them over into a mirrorless system. And that is a very real challenge. And there are a number of people that may look at the reality that the new G Master lens is that this lens, the Art Series lens is pretty close to 70% heavier and say, wow, I just really don't want to deal with that. However, I am glad, I hope that, and I believe that Sigma will be doing some dedicated development for not only Sony FE, but I think now that we're seeing the release of the Nikon Z and the Canon R full-frame mirrorless bodies, I think that maybe it'll give a little bit more flexibility for manufacturers like Sigma to develop, again, cross-platform. And so I think that we will see some dedicated lenses designed for these systems. But at the same time, I am glad to see these lenses, even in this form, for the simple reason that it gives Sony shooters right now, not hoping someday, maybe down the road, but it gives Sony shooters more options right now. And of course, at reasonable price points when compared to often to Sony versions of these lenses. And so if you happen to be a person to where you're more concerned with image quality, you're less concerned with size and weight, this lens may be something that works for you. Stay tuned and I'll be back with more coverage. In the meantime, take a look in the description down below. I do have an image gallery going, and this is a beautiful time of year here in Ontario, Canada to be shooting. It's autumn and a lot of the leaves are turning, and so I've got a lot of beautiful images there that you'll enjoy taking a look at, so check that out. Also, there are buying links if you'd like to purchase one of these lenses for yourself, and thanks to all of you that do use my links to purchase lenses, and I know that a lot of you do, and it helps to support this channel and keep it going. And of course, if you would like to be directly invested in this channel, you can become a patron, and there's a link to that in the description down below. And thanks to a growing number of you that have elected to do that and support what I'm doing. And once again, I appreciate it very much. If you haven't already, of course, you can click subscribe and stay tuned to further coverage of this lens and all the exciting new gear that's coming to market right now. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.